What's up, everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Mardek. And of course, last time we successfully completed Vern's arena run, one of, if not the most challenging arena runs at that. I'm thinking about, in particular, that one enemy at the end that healed to light damage, and that was certainly a bit of a trap. Fortunately, we remembered to plan for that one, and so we were able to take it out without too many issues there. But now that means we only have a couple people remaining for their arena runs, so next on our list is Zack. Before we get going, let's talk strategy for him. So Zack, what with him being the second to last person here, has had lots of time to level up, so he's actually all the way up at level 50 here, meaning that he's sitting on 1,500 life, which is quite a bit. That is around where we've said in the past we want people to be, so that they are not at risk of getting one shot, and that's before we add any additional items or passive abilities to boost his life further, so that's a strong place for us to be with Zack. In terms of MP, he's on only 89, even though he's a high level there, because Zack is the lowest spirit character of anyone in our party right now, so that means that, yeah, his MP is quite low. However, he only has one skill that uses MP, so we'll talk more about that later, but that means that, unlike with other people, we probably don't need to do too much to boost Zack's MP further. He is arguably the person who needs MP the least, after Eloise, of course, who has precisely 0 ways in which she uses MP. Other than that, he has relatively high base strength with 16, that's above average. Then 13 vitality is about average, and we also are picking up quite a bit of life just by being high level. Like we said, low spirit, and then 17 agility is quite quick, so more often than not, we will likely see Zack going first. Now let's talk about items. So in terms of weapons, let's start there. The Yin and Yang is Zack's strongest weapon, and although not the strongest weapon in the entire game, that title belongs to Slinick and the Drackle Crescent, but with 46 attack and 7 crit chance, that does mean that Zack should be critting fairly often, and then it's also effective against dark and light enemies, so we'll have extra damage against them. A little bit of attribute boosts as well with strength, vitality, and agility. Then in terms of the other weapons here, there really isn't any reason to use other weapons besides the Yin and Yang, because for the most part we're just talking about lower attack. Once you go all the way down to the Bone Slicer, you do have effectiveness against undead enemies, perhaps doing more damage against them, but you're sacrificing so much attack at this point. 46 versus 22, this weapon is all the way back from Chapter 2, so even then, I think, if you consider undead enemies, even under those circumstances, you'd probably still be dealing more damage with Yin and Yang than you would with the Bone Slicer. Not to mention, many undead enemies are also Dark Elemental, so that means Yin and Yang would also be getting that bonus damage there. And then you have, of course, Zack's starting weapon, the Shishit. So for that reason, definitely going to go with the Yin and Yang. In terms of chest plates, Zack can only wear up to medium armor, so that means that no Mithril plate mail, no Slockian plate mail, so he doesn't have as many options as, say, Mardek or Vern does. So that does mean that perhaps the Night Jacket comes back in as one of, if not the, top options for Zack. Of course, with the very high resistances, that is the primary reason why you would go this route. No defenses at all, so that would be the downside of it, but could very well be worth it nonetheless. That's what we've done for most other people. Then there's the Lesser Rainbow Shirt, which has much better defenses with 6 physical and 3 magic defense. You are sacrificing quite a bit in terms of resistances, but you are still getting some across the board, and also includes light on that list, whereas the Night Jacket does not. So that's a bit of a middle ground. Then there's the Geo Jacket if we were to specialize on Earth resistance, a little bit of vitality and HP as well. As we were saying before, we probably don't need much more of that, because we already have 1,500 HP, and so that does mean we should be safe from most potential one-shots, so for that reason the Geo Jacket, probably not something that we'll opt to use. Could go with the Trilobite Armor. This does give 5 physical defense, so better than either of the jackets in that case, but not as good as the Lesser Rainbow Shirt. Does give us the absorption 10% for water, so if we were concerned about water damage, this would be a way to maximize that. A little bit of HP as well, but 20 HP is probably not going to be a big deal. Then we have the Flame Mail. We got this one in Chapter 3, so the defenses are better than the Trilobite Armors with 7 there, and then absorption to fire. Now, Zack is an air elemental character, so he starts off with air elemental resistance and fire elemental weakness, so Flame Mail for that reason is a little bit intriguing to cover for one of Zack's biggest weaknesses. Otherwise, we could go with the Steel Stole for 10 physical defense. This would be the highest pure defensive option for Zack, because remember, you can't use the Mithril Plate Mail. Then also 50% resistance to physical damage means that if we were concerned about Zack taking some big hits, then this would probably be the best way to avoid getting one-shot. But once more, I think our HP is high enough that that's not a major concern at this stage. Similarly, you could boost Zack's HP further by going with the Green Stole for +6 Vitality. I still think this is probably overkill at this stage, so I don't think we ought to go this route. Then we have the Scarlet Stole, and we haven't opted to use this on anyone yet. However, I think that you could probably make the case that of all the people that you could use the Scarlet Stole on, Zack would probably be the best fit, because Zack, of course, uses only physical attacks, and therefore all of his attacks are getting boosted by that strength. So in that way, it would be helpful. It would, of course, be a more pure offensive route, whereas the other options that we've been considering have been certainly more along the defensive side. So I think we probably will still go with the Night Jacket, although I am curious as to how much damage we would be doing if we were to go with the Scarlet Stole instead. I deliberately didn't even put in the Azure Stole here, the one that gives +6 Spirit, because, like we said, Zack does only physical attacks, no spells, so there really isn't much purpose for that at all. It would boost Zack's MP, but Zack only has one ability that uses MP, so for that reason I think it would be quite a big stretch to use the Azure Stole. So let's go with the Night Jacket, and then that does of course mean that we should be also looking good from a resistance standpoint. Then for helmets, we have the Skull Helm, which is strong defensively with 4 physical and 2 magic defense. +2 Vitality would, of course, boost Zack's life a little bit further. Is it necessary at this stage? Probably not. So maybe we would consider to go with something else like the Elf Cap, which has similar defenses, but also gives some earth resistance, so that would probably be a little bit better than the Skull Helm, at least in this case. Could go with the Black Hat. Of course, that would be primarily for the dark resistance, and if we do go with the Night Jacket, then we probably don't need any more dark resistance than this, because we're already healing to it. So I think we probably do go with the Elf Cap here. And then in terms of our accessories, could go with the Yellow Fairy. This has of course been one of the staples of our previous arena runs, what with the auto haste allowing us to go twice. So that is very strong, and we would need a very good reason not to use it. Scarab of Health has of course been the other piece that we've typically been using for other people's arena runs. 5 defense, 5 magic defense means that it does make up a bit for the lack of defenses on the Night Jacket, and then that regen and +5 vitality means that this would boost our HP even further, and at that point we would definitely be in a good place for sure. Then a little bit of resistances to some statuses as well is not major, but it's not bad either. So these are definitely the front runners. If we wanted to do more to boost our HP or Earth resistance, then we could go with the Emerald Bangles here. 3 defense, 3 magic defense is also solid. Or alternatively, the Eclipse Amulet for, again, high defenses. +2 Spirit is not so relevant for Zack, but resistance to both light and dark, and a lot of it at that, would be good. But if we are going to use the Night Jacket, then of course that means that the dark resistance is not doing much for us. We're already healing to that type of damage, so probably pass on that as well and go with our usual Yellow Fairy and Scarab of Health. Then we will of course use our typical life restoring, MP restoring, status removing potions here, just in case we find ourselves in one of those traps that we saw in previous arena runs, so that will keep us covered there. Now let's talk skills. So Zack has, like we said, all physical abilities here. Berserk is a bit of a setup move though. It allows Zack to enter a Berserker Rage, doubling strength, but becoming impossible to control. So we learned this one way back in the beginning of Chapter 2, and it does mean that Zack's normal attacks do become stronger. However, we can't use any other abilities, and it does mean that we can't even choose who we're going to target with those attacks, so for that reason, if we don't mind who we're attacking, then maybe we could use this to set up, but I think for the most part, we're just going to opt to use our normal attacks and not spend the time using Berserk. Then we have Crescendo Slash, which is an attack that increases in power when used in succession in battle. This is an attack that can get quite powerful for the long boss fights where you use it once, twice, 3 times, and then because it gets 25% stronger each time, it starts to add up quite quickly. However, given how most arena runs tend to have enemies that are numerous but not that strong, means that Crescendo Slash is probably not going to be something that we use much, if at all, here. Then we have Sure Slash, which inflicts only half the damage of a normal attack, so lower damage, but it never misses. So if we do find ourselves going up against some of those enemies that have high evasion chance, then this could be a good way to counter that a bit. Then we have Coup de Grace, which increases the damage based on the number of status effects on our opponent. So there are some opponents that start with statuses, not many in the way of typical types of enemies we'd expect to encounter in the arena. Tends to be more so the kind of thing you see on bosses with haste, regen, things of that sort. So unlikely we'd use this very often, but maybe once or twice if we do find some opponents that have some statuses. Then we have Sin Strike, which inflicts damage based on the number of foes that Zack has slain. So this gets more powerful over time based on how many opponents Zack has taken out. So this could be a strong piece here as long as we are going against enemies that don't resist or outright heal to dark damage. This is one of Zack's only ways of dealing other elements of damage, because all these other attacks here are non-elemental, and then if we were to use a default attack, which we'll talk about in a second, then that would also be a way of either dealing non-elemental or air elemental damage. So this is one thing that gives us a little bit of flexibility in that regard, but Zack is not as versatile as some other characters in that sense. Then we have Immoral Injustice, which is the newest ability that Zack has picked up. It deals great damage to both light and dark elemental opponents, so that's one way to make up for Sin Strike not being effective against dark elemental characters, because they're probably going to resist or heal to that damage. We could instead use something like Immoral Injustice, and that would deal a lot of damage to them. Against the light opponents, they're likely weak to dark, in which case we'd opt to use Sin Strike perhaps instead, or we'd have some options. We could use either Sin Strike or Immoral Injustice. So those are the options in terms of active abilities here. In terms of offensive reactions, interestingly, Zack is actually one of the weakest in this regard. Notice that he has only plus 20% damage here. That means that there are many people who have better pure damage offensive reactions, including Eloian. So we'll definitely throw that on. The increased critical chance, we saw that his weapon already starts off with 7% crit chance, so to add another 20 on top of that is enough that he should be critting with some consistency. Then the accuracy, if we were to use Sure Strike, then of course we would guarantee that we're hitting, but even if we were to use some other form of attack, then having some additional accuracy is not bad. And his current weapon, the Yin and Yang, is non-elemental. Therefore, if we were to not hit our Soul Strike or not equip our Soul Strike, we would be dealing non-elemental damage. But by equipping this gives us a little bit more flexibility. We can also make our physical attacks air elemental in that case if we hit our reaction, so let's equip that. Then we have some quarries for undead, insect, and spirit, so we'll deal plus 50% damage against all those types of enemies. And we have enough RP as well to throw on some drain HP, so that way when we're dealing damage, we can also heal up a little bit as well. So we have enough RP here to use all these abilities. That is, of course, one of the benefits of Zack being level 50, so he has a lot of RP to burn. And so, similar story with the defensive reactions here. We'll take everything we can get, minus 10, 20 damage, all the soaks, and because Zack does not have access to heavy armors, that means that his defensive reactions here are not great, with the exception of the evasion. So anyone can get 20% evasion. However, Zack actually gets 50% evasion from his Yin and Yang weapon, of all places, so this means that as long as we hit our reactions, Zack is going to be very hard for opponents to hit that 70% evasion. In terms of magic offensive reactions, well, Zack has no spells, so nothing there. In terms of magic defensive abilities, Zack also doesn't have a lot of ways to pick up these reactions, because those tend to come from either robes or, on a few occasions, shields. And of course, Zack can't equip shields. So we'll take what we can get here. We would need to pass on at least one of these resistances here, and if we are going with the Night Jacket, then that probably means that we don't need to have on magic resistance to dark, because we're already healing to that. So we should be alright in that regard, and that does mean that we have a lot of resistances for fire, water, air, and earth, so that's fantastic. Now let's talk about passive abilities, and we probably do want to start with resistances there. So we've mastered everything that Zack can master here, and that means that resist dark, for the same reason we were talking about earlier, when we're using the Night Jacket, probably don't find this all that necessary. So Zack does start out with fire weakness, what with him being an air elemental character, so I think that is probably something that we want to prioritize here. Then we can also throw on Rainbow Aura to get a little bit of resistances for everything. Then we have 10 RP remaining. So from here, it's a question of would we prefer water, earth, or maybe ether? I'd say Ether is pretty unusual, so we probably want to pass on that. So that leaves us with either Water or Earth. I think we are getting some Earth resistance from the Elf Cap, so if we were to equip this, then that might even bring us high enough to heal in some cases, or at least outright mitigate Earth damage, whereas Water we're a little bit lower in that case, so maybe we go with Water, just to focus on things that we are weaker on, rather than overcommitting to things that we're already pretty decent at doing. Then we have 2 RP remaining. What do we do with that? That is typically the territory where we're looking at putting on +1 of some attribute, so we could go with Agility, Spirit, probably not. Vitality, we probably have enough of that at the moment. I would argue Strength is probably the best fit for Zack, because again, all of his attacks get boosted by Strength, so this will be quite useful here. So let's see where that leaves us. That means that Zack is at 2,000 HP, so definitely looking good on that front. Then still 89 MP, I think, because Immoral Injustice is the only ability that uses MP, and it uses 10 at a time, that means that we'll have 8 uses before we run out of MP, and it's only something we'll use against probably Dark Elemental opponents, because if they're Light Elemental, then we could use Sin Strike, so I think that it's going to be something we use infrequently enough that that won't be an issue. Then we've boosted Vitality a bit more by putting on the Scarab of Help, so that should help as well. And then in terms of resistances, we have a lot. So this is primarily because Zack has so much RP to use, so we can put on lots of those passive abilities. So we are definitely healing to Dark, that's great. And Fire, Earth, and Air, those are also not very far away, especially if you consider that we put on the magic defensive reactions, meaning that we will add 50% resistance to those, assuming that we hit our reactions when we're getting hit by spells. So in those cases, we would still heal from all those. So that means that leaves us with only Light, Ether, and Fig are the things that Zack is most vulnerable to, and I think that's a small enough list, and in some cases, rare enough types of damage that Zack should be doing very well defensively. Not to mention, like we were saying before, 70% chance to evade physical attacks, so I'm liking where we're standing there. So let's heal up a bit before we head in, and save. And now let's jump in. So do the survival tournament for Zack. And here we go. And love the music. Zack's is one of my favorites. So start off with the bandit, and he does hit us. He does go before us. How dare he? So in terms of the type of damage we want to do to you, well, as long as it's not air, it should be fine. So that means that we could, say, go with a normal physical attack and not hit our reaction, or we could go with another type of special ability here. And one of the reasons why I was deliberately holding off a little bit on using Zack. That. Yeah, so in case you didn't know, 9,999 is the maximum amount of damage that anyone can possibly do, and Zack has it on Sin Strike. So this could end up being fairly straightforward arena run here. Of course, we did level up Zack a lot, so for anyone at level 50, their arena run would perhaps be on the easier side. But we could also just make a point of absolutely annihilating everyone that we see here. I mean, we'll take a look at what these Leaf Stingers have going on. They have 0 defense, 0 magic defense, and weakness to both fire and air, so we could use the default attack, or we could proceed to just max out all of our damage here instead. So, I mean, why wouldn't we, right? Well, let's heal off our poison here, just in case. We'll get rid of that. And then maybe for you, we'll use a normal physical attack here, just to see how much damage that deals, because that could be helpful to know. And we even get to restock on that antidote as well, so no problems there. Centaur, you are an earth elemental enemy, which means that you are also weak to air, so we could go with the default attack here. You do have 3 defense, so we could try doing that. Sure, one-shot you as well. I think that's going to be a bit of a theme with Zack here. You might remember me saying a while ago that Zack, yeah, he deals a lot of damage. Of course, he can only deal damage to one enemy at a time. That is perhaps one of his weaknesses. So this fight here does mean that we will likely take some hits. That is, if they can land a hit on us, well, with our 70% evasion, and that time, they cannot break through. So we could Sin Strike these guys as well. But because we can only take out 2 before they get the chance to go again, that does mean that 1 more will have the chance to try to hit us. but try as they might, doesn't mean they succeeded. Whereas for us, yeah, we'll just keep on using some Sin Strikes. Round 5. Now we have some Angry Cods. Let's take a look at them. So we actually only go once before they all go. And they are weak to air, so that could be a reasonable option to use our physical attacks there. Do have 10 defense, so they will mitigate a little bit of that damage. Let's give it a shot here, just to see. Still, plenty of damage for it. No problem. Will they hit? No. They cannot do it, so more the same. More the same. So this, of course, means that Zack has now become far and away our highest damage character thus far. Vern did come close on some occasions with his default attacks even, but that was when we were doing a lot to boost his spirit, and that was typically against both undead enemies when he had 40 undead on, and against enemies that were weak against light, so that was, in many instances, under ideal circumstances, whereas in the case of Sin Strike, we are doing this against enemies that do not have any weakness to dark, so that is just plain and simple, pure 9,999 damage. Now, of course, that Centaur was going next, and we probably should have taken note of how we could have gotten rid of it before it attacked, but it did heal us anyway, so we'll take it out and we'll actually level up in the process. Round 7. This time a turquoise. Okay, let's take a closer look at you. So you have 20 defense, meaning that you are, yes, certainly more defensive than any other enemy that we've fought thus far. And, you are quite resistant to air, so our default attacks probably wouldn't be that effective. You are 20% resistant to dark, so dare I say, we might not deal max damage to you if we were to Sin Strike. But of course, Sin Strike ignores defenses, so it is certainly still our best option here, and not max damage, but I suppose we can live with that. Round 8, getting close to the end now. This time, a Flame Soul. Let's take a closer look here, because this guy, being Fire Elemental, is, of course, healing to fire damage, but 100% resistant to both air and non-elemental damage, meaning that our default attack would deal 0 damage, regardless of whether or not we hit our offensive reaction to trigger Soul Strike. So that means that this is the closest we've come, thus far at least, to a quote-unquote trap enemy in this arena. The one workaround would be that, well, it has only 20% resistance to dark. So that means that, yeah, a Sin Strike seems like it is certainly in order right about now. We could perhaps opt to use something like one of our offensive potions to try to deal some damage that way. It is fire elemental, so something like a really cold water could also be effective. So this is one of those circumstances where if you have not gotten as many kills as we have with Zack to boost his Sin Strike damage, and Soul Strike and Sin Strike's not looking like a great option for that reason, then it would be useful to load up on some really cold waters to use those instead. However, still max damage. So, yeah, why not? We'll do that. Fire Essence as well, and second to last round, this time against several of those Centaurs, except these guys, well, do they really stand a chance? No. No, they don't. Now, of course, I did proceed to miss that reaction there, so it did deal a little bit of water damage, but let's exact some revenge right about now. And you're next. Get out of here. Okay, so now on to our final round, and it will be against a golem. We've seen several of these in other people's arenas, and typically they are a little bit tricky because they have a fair bit of HP at over 4,000 and also 30 defense, meaning that in most cases, at least in terms of physical attackers, people would struggle a bit to take these guys out. It does have weakness to air, meaning that if we were to use our default attacks and hit our Soul Strike reaction, then that would be a decent option. However, 0% resistance to dark means even you. One shot. So with that, Zack handily takes care of his arena run, so congratulations to you. Congratulations, Fighter. You've won the tournament, apparently. Here, have a prize. Also, get out of here. So well done, Zack. Congratulations on what was one of the easiest arena runs thus far. Of course, that was perhaps due in large part to you being very over-leveled at this point, so for other people who have not done as much to level up and get kills with Zack, that probably would not be nearly as straightforward as we just saw it. But let's take a close look at what you picked up there, because you got the Bear Charm, which is a special item that Zack won from the arena, only he can equip it. 4 defense, 4 magic defense. No abilities that we learn from it, and it's only usable by Zack, of course. Gives +3 strength and agility, and resistance to air and fire, emphasizing Zack's strengths from a resistance standpoint and covering for his weaknesses. So well done. Then let's also have a quick chat with our latest arena victor. So Zack, what do you have to say? And it does look like he has more to say. Of course, Zack has been very tight-lipped in the past. I see that you're not going to give up on this easily. Very well. I will indulge you momentarily. What would you like to know? Well, why did you become a mercenary? A lengthy and somber tale. Suffice to say, it was not entirely by choice, but by lack of other options. Oh? Is he actually going to tell us about his past? You see, I'm from a faraway land, from a village where we were all members of the same tribe, who lived and worked together. We were called the Bear Tribe, and honor was of utmost importance to us. The tattoo above my eye marks me as a member of this tribe. Oh, you mean you're a proud warrior race guy? I suppose you could say this. Now, will you allow me to continue my tale that you have coaxed out of me, or would you rather I return to silence? Well, carry on. As a member of the Bear Tribe, I was young and inexperienced, yet, as is common amongst young people, I thought that I could handle everything, and I was very optimistic. I had great pride in my skills and was eager to show them off and help others. Our village was out of the way and was rarely visited by anyone at all, other than a few traders every so often. There was one man, a northerner, an adventurer. He came to our village seeking assistance in some quest or another and told tales of his exploits. It was against our strong code of honor, handed down through many generations of ancestors, to help strangers such as him. So the elders refused to give him even the time of day. But I was young. Well, then what happened? Another time, perhaps. It has been long since I spoke so much, and my throat, it is sore. We must return to fighting and traveling. Oh. And Zack, who has been so secretive, so quiet in the past, finally opens up just a bit, so with a little more luck, maybe we can get him to tell us the rest of the story soon. But congratulations one more time for completing your arena run and picking up the Bear Charm there. As for who is next, of course, there's only one person remaining, so I'll give you one guess who it is. But either way, I'll catch you next time.